Hello, welcome to Rethinking the Six Wives of Henry VIII. In this episode we are talking Katheryn Howard. If you don't know who Katheryn Howard was, she was the fifth wife of Henry VIII, and she was also the second of his wives to be executed. So what are the legacies that have been left of Katheryn Howard? Well, people tend to think of her as this adulteress. Lots of people still find her guilty. Other people find her to be innocent and a victim of her surroundings. And other people just think she was a silly little girl. But what are the legacies that I believe she deserves to be remembered by? First of all, someone who brings fun and energy with them. Secondly, a true lover of fashion. Third of all, trying to take her role as queen seriously. And fourthly, dignified beyond her years in death. So let's look at the first one, bringing fun and energy to court, because this Katheryn did in bucket loads. For Henry VIII, it was love at first sight when he first met Katheryn Howard. She was young, beautiful, energetic, vivacious, and it reminded Henry of what he used to be in his youth, because that was what Henry was. Henry was all those things. Henry was energetic, Henry was fun, he was ambitious, he loved dancing, he loved music, and he wasn't like that anymore. But Katheryn reminded him of what he used to be. When Katheryn married Henry, she was just a teenager. She was a teenage bride. She was full of fun, full of energy. Now, Katheryn first came to court in 1539 in preparation to serve what was going to be the new Queen, Anne of Cleves. And Henry pretty swiftly had his eye on her. By the time that he married her, she was just a teenage bride. We're still not sure exactly of her age or her birthday, but we knew she was young. And can you imagine court life that time? Not only is it full of dancing, music, food, wine and beer, lots of alcohol, it's also full of wonderful, fun, like-minded people, full of beautiful people. You could only be at court if you're a good-looking person. Ugly people were not allowed at court. I know beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but Henry wanted beautiful people at his court because then he could play the game of courtly love. And Henry indulged in what Katheryn loved. Katheryn loved music and she loved dancing, and Henry revelled in it. He himself could rarely dance because of injury that he had to his leg that was then infected. But he had a whole host of men that he could place in front of her for her choosing that she could dance with. Every day at court for Katheryn was a party day. And it was her bubbly, energetic spirit that brought life not only back into Henry, but back into court again. The next legacy that I believe Katheryn is deserved to be known for is that she's a true lover of fashion. Now, when we think of the Tudors who loved the fashions, we think of either Anne Boleyn with her French style, her famous bee necklace, or we think of her daughter Elizabeth I with her thousands of dresses that she had in her wardrobe. Lots of pearls draped everywhere, and a lot of her dress encompassing symbolism, be it the dress with little eyes and ears on, or dresses with Tudor roses on it. Either way, we don't necessarily think of Katheryn Howard straight off, but she was a lover of fashion. The French ambassador described Katheryn as graceful rather than beautiful. And Henry spent lots of money on Katheryn and what Katheryn was passionate about. And one of her passions was fashion. And so Henry spent lots of money on Katheryn's passion for clothing. Katheryn loved the latest fabrics and the most dazzling of jewels. Her inventory suggests that Katheryn was very kind-hearted in this nature. And actually she wanted other people to enjoy fashion too, and so she dressed her ladies in fine French fashions as well. So I tend to think of her and her ladies a little bit like the Tudor court Mean Girls. If you've seen the film Mean Girls, when they're walking down that corridor and looking all sassy and everyone's looking at them, I kind of think that with Katheryn and her ladies. Katheryn's there and her ladies are there and they're all looking absolutely stunning. As well as her ladies, she also bestowed gifts on her stepdaughters, including Mary. She gave her a pomander, which is used to cover scents and to fight infections. This pomander was gold and encrusted in rubies, and she even gave Anne of Cleves, her predecessor, the one who she had previously served, she gave her a ring. The next legacy that I believe she deserves to have is that she took her role as queen seriously, which is something a lot of people don't really think about. They tend to think of her as this kind of airhead, this bimbo, this silly little girl that all she wanted to do is dance. But it's not quite the case. Now, Katheryn was not meant to rule. She was not born into it like Catherine of Aragon. She didn't educate herself to the level of Anne Boleyn. And she had no idea about court procedures, about political alliances and ambitions. She had no idea who she should be towards the public. She didn't have a clue. But she asked. She asked how she should address people like the Archbishop, how she should address people like Anne of Cleves, her predecessor who she had previously served. How does she now talk to her? Because Katheryn was now queen and Anne was Henry's sister. How does she talk to her? And Katheryn did try. She was concerned, she was naive, she didn't know her way in the world, she was a teenage girl. But she's not just concerned with dancing, she did try. She even did the queenly thing of become a patron for the arts. She had a couple of patronages, as well as rewarding her friends and family, as you do. She even requested pardons for people like Sir Thomas Wyatt when they found themselves in trouble, and many others who she had sympathy for. On the 1st of March, Katheryn met with her tailor and she spoke about ordering some clothes for Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, who was currently residing in the Tower. Now it was freezing cold and Katheryn wanted Margaret Pole to be warm. So she ordered her a few things: a nightgown, a kirtle, a petticoat, some shoes, things to just keep the cold off to this elderly woman. In matters in which were important to her and that Katheryn sympathised with, Katheryn did try her best to intervene as best as she could. She did try. And finally, the last legacy I believe she deserves to be known for is that she was dignified beyond her years in death. Katheryn's fall was brutal, agonising, quick, and also slow. She spent many time in house arrest at Sion, and then she was finally taken to the Tower. However, when this was all happening, she wasn't really aware of what was going on. She was kept in the dark and she just didn't have a clue what was happening around her. She was terrified. And so when she came to the Tower finally, she was in fear for her life. Because of course her cousin Anne Boleyn, Henry's second wife, had also come to the Tower and not come out of it. When she came to the Tower, she couldn't compose herself. She was weeping, she was crying. She was condemned by an Act of Parliament, so she didn't have to go through the rigmarole of a trial. But she did manage to request a private execution, like her cousin Anne had also had a private execution too, within the confines of the Tower. Sir John Gage, the constable of the Tower, said, "Dispose of her soul and prepare for death, for she was to be beheaded the next day." And after that, Katheryn then asked for the execution block on which would be used the next day. And then she practised. She practised laying down her head on the block again and again, just making sure that she got it just right to make it clean and swift. After all, she was not having the disposal of her head like her cousin Anne. She was to be disposed of by an axe. On the day of her execution, she wore a dark velvet dress. She had to be helped up the staircase of the scaffold By this point, she was not only scared, but visibly the people could see her fear. She spoke a short, conventional speech, praising the king, obedience to the monarchy, dying in the Catholic faith, praying for her soul, and saying that this was worthy and just. And then she died as she practised, laying her head on the block for a swift removal. And if you're wondering what happened to Katheryn's body, it was placed near Anne, her cousin Anne Boleyn, in the chapel in the Tower St. Peter ad Vincula. I hope these legacies that I have spoken about today has maybe changed your mind on Katheryn and thought of her in a different light. So when you next think of Katheryn, don't think of her as a silly little girl or an adulteress. Think of her as a fun, energetic young woman, a true lover of fashion who took her role as queen seriously, and a young woman who died with great dignity and respect. I hope you have enjoyed this episode on Katheryn Howard. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Chat to me in the comments all things Katheryn Howard, and I will see you soon for the next video. Bye for now.